says preparing to live stream. That's good. It's a good sign. All right, we're on. We're live.
Excellent. Yeah. Welcome everyone to this session of AI Insights. If you're a leader, a question for you to consider is, are you like many leaders and you find yourself getting buried in too many details? Are you overwhelmed? Are you not being able to focus on really achieving the vision or new projects or increasing the value of the company and so on? Well, one of the concepts out there that you may have heard referred to is the idea of who, not how. Dan Sullivan popularized it in a book, but it actually encompassed in many guidances giving entrepreneurs, business owners, actually leaders at all levels within the organization is if you don't focus on building leaders or focus on who is doing the work and enabling them to do the work, then if you focus correspondingly on the how, you're naturally going to bog yourself down in the detail. You're not going to be able to get beyond doing the things that you as a leader should do. And that actually is core to our discussion in this session of AI Insights when we're going to look at what about bots? What about AI for the who or for the how, right? And then what does that mean and how does that work? So welcome everyone. I'm Mike Russell here with Stephen Bowman, again, software expert, AI guru. And what about it? What about this, Steve? So this is an interesting. We've talked before about inserting bots in different roles, and even the concept of having like a AI bot manager. But now this is taking it one step further. Who, not how.
What? Great. Excellent. Good afternoon. One of my favorite books of the last couple of years. I actually read all three. So I'm a big fan of Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. They combined to make that book. And the first book that I read from them was a book called The Gap and the Gain. And in The Gap and the Gain, it outlines a process you can use to, instead of measuring your progress based on what's left to do, which always leaves you feeling like there's a huge gap, you instead measure your progress based on what you've done, which is the gain. How have I grown? How have I gotten closer to my goal?
Right.
What have I accomplished? So it's a kind of a mental game that you play with yourself on making sure that you are continually motivated based on what you've done and feeling good about it.
Right. So I would that is part and parcel of the concept of celebrating wins, right? Don't
Celebrating
lose
wins.
track of don't, it's a both and. Yeah, know where you are and how much you got to go, but also celebrate your wins and progress.
100%. The other book in that series is 10x is easier than 2x. And in 10x is easier than 2x, it talks about mental shifts. It talks about how trying to make incremental changes is actually more difficult than making wholesale changes because of our desire to kind of hold on to what we think is working when it probably isn't working as well as we want, et cetera. We don't have to talk about those books. Instead, we'll talk about who, not how.
Well, actually, just as a footnote, I'll make a
Yep,
note.
yep.
We should probably talk about 10x rather than 2x at another time with regards to AI, because that can figure into that as well. But all right,
Absolutely.
who
Yep,
not how, and
100%.
we'll stay on topic here.
Maybe next week. All right. I love it. So delegate to elevate is one of the concepts in Who Not How, where you're actively, instead of asking, how can I do this? You're asking, who can I get to do this for me? With the entire concept being, it's a Dan Sullivan thing. It's your unique ability. It's your superpower. It's your zone of excellence. Figuring out what you're either the best in the world at or where your absolute superpowers come in and trying to stay in that area as much as possible. Now, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, a lot of times we get pulled in multiple directions. We have to do, multiple activities or responsibilities. And really, what we're talking about with Who Not How is finding a person to manage that stuff for you so that you can concentrate on your superpower. That's what's going to give you the most leverage in your business, maybe the most leverage in your personal life, a combination of both. The better I am inside, the better I feel about me as a human being, a person, and the things that I'm doing, the more I'll be able to accomplish. Wonderful book. If you're not familiar, grab it. Highly, highly, highly recommended. Can AI agents be your who rather than you trying to figure out how to do things? That's the question that we pose today. And I'll say, go figure. Yes, not for everything. Absolutely not for everything. But I just gave a presentation last week. Mike and I were just talking about it before we came on. AMN Group, Perry Marshall, wonderful people. If you guys can hear the sound of my voice, know that I love the time that we spent together. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you, Perry, for having me. In talking to these business owners are usually north of a couple $1 million in revenue. They want to make those jumps. A lot of them are thinking who, not how right now. How can I buy another business? How can I incorporate teams of other people to manage things for me? And when we started to talk about AI, I started to talk about how, oh, well, that entire workflow that you just described, we can solve all of those problems. We can either automate, which I don't recommend right now, or we can augment where AI does most of the work. A human being looks at it, reviews it, approves it, and then we move on to the next one while AI is doing the work in the background. And I got a lot of stunned looks where they said, AI can do that? The answer is yes, absolutely. I'll give you one example right now. So working with someone who they make changes and rewrite, and they give a lot of assistance and mentorship when it comes to resumes, job resumes. Now, I got to tell you, I personally haven't written a resume in a very long time. I just hit an anniversary in my life a couple of weeks ago, and I remembered it kind of on accident. I've actually been an independent contractor, consultant, or run my own business now for 2 decades. It's actually been 20 years already.
Wow.
Yeah, which really kind of, I said that I had the same reaction. I thought, oh my gosh, has it really been that long? And I did the math, and sure enough, it was. So I may not be her ideal client. However, there are lots and lots and lots of people who are. Oh, and by the way, in talking with her, you never know what happens in the future. I might be a client. Nobody ever knows, right? It's kind of funny how it goes. But what I explained to her was that maybe a good way for her to increase her conversion rate on anyone that or anybody that comes to her website, and or a marketing campaign that will draw people to her website, could be get our hyper-personalized #1 recommendation on how to upgrade your resume for free, right? We're going to give away just a tiny little bit of expertise that she has, because she definitely owns that domain, very successful business, for free, to establish goodwill, to establish credibility. And with goodwill and credibility, that generally leads itself to a conducive environment for business to transpire. Wow,
Right.
that was great advice. I would love to do business with you. How much does it cost? Here's our value proposition. Wonderful, I'm in. So in talking to her about that, she said, wow, but that's going to take my people a long time. And I said, great. So here's what we do. We create a digital assistant that allows people to put in a little bit of information and upload their resume. That resume upload is then read by AI, and we've created instructions, and we've recreated your evaluation process and your recommendation process in a bot. And we also upload 5, 10, 20 resumes before and after your changes. And we have an AI agent report the #1 recommendation for their resume for free. And she said, wow, that sounds crazy. How much would that cost? And my response was, well, I'll guesstimate. And we ran a little tiny little exercise right there on the fly with an assistant that I created for her. And it was 9 cents. So when I think about lead gen cost and what it costs to actually convert someone once they land on a funnel page, a sales page for me, I think 9 pennies. Chances are good it costs a heck of a lot more just to get them there from an ad on Facebook or whatever. She actually does a lot of organic work as well. So between the organic work that she does on LinkedIn and a very small cost associated with getting somebody their #1 tip, with the couple thousand resumes that she's got per industry or sub-industry, or maybe that's one of the onboarding questions. Are you a software engineer? Are you a chef? Are
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
what industry do you associate with? What's your most recent job title? What you want your job title to be? We can take all of that, streamline that entire process. It's going to take some tweaking on the front end, right? A couple of iterations, but I am positive, 100% positive, that that is something that is absolutely beautifully suited for AI to handle.
Oh, that's cool. Did you have a skeptic in the room said, "Hey, can you get that down to 5 cents?"
Of course. And I said, no, we can do it for cheaper than that. Here, watch how you can change what model you ask OpenAI to
Right.
use. And we can also use, we don't have to use OpenAI. We could use Gemini, or we could use Claude, Anthropic, whatever. There's tons of other models out there that we could use. And yeah, I got a lot of blank stares, candidly. I got a lot of,
Right.
the repeated question is, or the repeated statement was, wow, I didn't know it could do that. And over dinner with some old timers, right? Guys who have a little bit more gray hair than me, and they've been writing code a little bit longer. We all agreed that, some folks that you might know, Mike, we all agreed that the limits to what AI can do are really harnessed in your imagination. Your imagination is the limit for what AI can produce. Is it going to be perfect? No. Is it going to be 100%? Probably not. My guess is that even without trying very hard, AI can give you 80% of what you're looking for on an untrained, untuned, completely zero shot, meaning you just throw something at it and say, here, help me with this, and it'll get you 80% of the way there. And I hear a
So I
lot of
think,
people.
the important thing to note about this is that the who, not how piece of this is that you may need to be involved in training the bot in the how once and then tune it a few times, right? But
Exactly.
the leverage here is in not doing it over and over and over and multiple times down the road, right? So now I've got somebody to do it. But that mirrors exactly what you'd have to do with a person, right? If you brought a
100%.
person into the business and trained them on your particular process, same thing, right? So it's no different from that.
I agree 100%. In fact, great feedback. So one of the questions that I presented these guys in my presentation with 7 questions, just conceptual questions to think about, and we'll probably review this next week or the week after. 7 conceptual questions that you need to think about when you're going into the mode of implementing AI in your business. You don't have to have great answers. And these are almost questions in a who, not how scenario that I recommend you asking your new who, or when you're evaluating, is this person right to be my AI who?
Right.
And one of those questions that I think you fundamentally have to attack is, do you consider your AI agents to be employees? That gave a lot, there's some heartburn in the room when I asked that question. And of course, after we had a pretty lengthy and fun discussion about it, they asked me. And the answer is yes. I absolutely think of my AI agents that I employ right now as employees, the same as I do my application developers, my project managers, my accountants, all of them. Absolutely 100%. Now, the big question is.
No, well, wait. So, I think this is important. So, what was the nature of some of the pushback, right? So, like, what was some of the hardware?
It's just software.
Oh, okay. All right, got it. Right.
It's not alive. It can't think. And then we went down a rabbit hole, and this is right where I was going next. We went down a rabbit hole associated with, well, what happens when something goes wrong? Which is actually the very last question that I asked them to conceptually understand. Software breaks, systems go down, the internet crashes, these things happen. So what do your AI agents do when they can't beam back to the mothership, when they can't get answers? Do they say, I'm just a piece of software, I can't help you with that right now? Or do they guess? There's a lot of chatbots. Here's a challenge for everybody who can hear my voice. This is fun. just go to random websites. And whenever you see that little icon in the corner and you know what that icon means, that means that they've got a chat bot. Ask their chat bot, what's the meaning of life? If you
Yeah,
get a
okay.
response, if you get a response and it's anything more than a paragraph, chances are good that they have not programmed their chatbot, their digital assistant, to say, hey, these are the parameters that I can work in, and I'm not going to guess, but let me use my little mechanism here. Let me grab your contact info, and then I'm going to email my boss your question. My boss will contact you with an answer. That individual little workflow does a lot of things. Number one, it adds credibility. Number two, it's how I like to think of how my employees work. When they don't know the answer, I don't want them to guess. I want them to feel comfortable saying, I don't know the answer. Let me find a subject matter expert and get that for you.
You built in exception handling, basically, is the term for that, right?
Exactly, 100%. If you don't know what to do, don't guess. But not everybody thinks that way, which is a big part of why we ask the question conceptually, fundamentally, what do you want your digital assistants to say when they don't know the answer? Do they want to get you involved? What does that process in the back end look like? How do you get notified? How do you get back to your clients? If you've got a high-end prospect on the line and your bot gives them a guess answer, that's probably bad. Or if they take contact information from your prospect and that never makes it to you for lead gen or follow-up, that's probably pretty bad too. So
Right.
you want to be able to think about that or work with somebody who's thinking about that ahead of time for you.
Become his employees. Okay. That's, oh, yeah, we should go into the other six next time.
We've
All right.
definitely got
So
them.
now that we're doing this, what other aspects are important for people to know about how to use AI as who, not how, beyond the training part, which we
Yeah.
talked about?
Mike, the conversation came up. Some people were looking for subject matter specific implementations, right? Somebody was
Oh,
asking,
right.
they do a lot of follow-up and lead follow-up, et cetera, via text message, SMS. And they ask, hey, what's the number one platform for, generative AI and text messaging? And I had an answer for them. There's a platform that we're using where we can reuse these things called workflows or flows. And it doesn't matter if it's Facebook Messenger, your website, or a text message, right? That same mechanism will work. I told him the name of the platform, and his response was, oh, so do you recommend using that platform? And I said, no, I recommend you living your life and you finding somebody to write that platform for you, because I've written code and I've seen a lot of those platforms, and I've, ManyChat and all this, no code, low code, bubble.io stuff. And it's really painful. And I know a thing or three about it because I've been involved in this stuff for a long time, and it's still really painful for me. In fact, my application developers, the first couple of weeks were really painful for them because it took them out of their comfort zone. They're used to writing code line by line. They can make it do exactly what they need to. And instead, they had to shift their mind into this mindset of, okay, this is how I produce a workflow here. They're a little kludgy. They're still early. The functionality is there, but no, if you're a busy business owner, the last thing in the world I recommend is for you to go learn, a chatbot builder
Right.
platform on
Yeah, that would
any
just be,
chance.
yeah, and now we're out of the frying pan into the fire, right? Instead of being the
Exactly.
details of the process, now we're building we're getting into the details of how to build something to be the details of the process. So,
Exactly. 100%. So that was most of the feedback that I got. A lot of the other comments, again, like I said, I think there was some of these folks were familiar, right? They'd use ChatGPT, they'd have some of these conversations, and I've got a handful of tips. A lot of the stuff I've talked about here, um, you know, ask ChatGPT or whomever, ask your AI agent. When you give them your prompt, you give them all the details you possibly could, all the stuff that you could think of. Always ask before you get to the point where you tell it what you want done. Always ask, please ask me any additional questions you need and anything that you need to understand better before you produce results for me.
Right.
And they almost always come back with additional questions. And me, I always seem to skip one. So I say, those are really great questions. Can you please ask me one at a time, interview style? And it will. I find that to be most effective for me. And I got a lot of feedback from them where they're just not thinking of using an agent that way. So a lot of our offline and dinner conversations and that kind of stuff was about using AI in a conversational manner. It's okay to tell AI, I don't understand what you just said. Can you tell me again, or can you summarize that better for me? Or, I understood 3/4 of it, but that last piece, didn't make sense. Or can you link me to the articles which you found this information on and I can do more research? Those are all legit questions to help you understand what you're looking for. And I just don't think a lot of people are using it that way. They're kind of putting an idea in, they're getting something back, and then that's where they stop. They're not iterating conversationally, which I very, very, very strongly recommend.
Okay. Anything else before we move on to news?
No, I think that's good. I'm ready to talk about the news.
Okay, so let's talk about AI and fruit.
Yeah, yeah. So Chat GPT, whatever, OpenAI, released a new model just late last week. I think it was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They're all kind of blending together. And its nickname is Strawberry, and it's Chat GPT 4.01. And they said that they reverted the number to go back to 1 because they built a different model that mimics reasoning much better. So they claim that the model thinks about the answer longer to come up with better answers to your questions. Now, I haven't done any side-by-side testing yet, but again, what they're talking about is the ability to better evaluate your question, spending more processing power on evaluating your question to get you better answers. And the
Oh, I
early
see.
buzz.
So instead of, let me just quickly, so is it, instead of making an initial guess at what it thinks you're asking and just responding based on that, it now actually, in some sense, does it ask questions like you're saying it should, or is it doing on its own, doing more reasoning, or is it actually to the level of what you suggested that we do with the bots and actually has the interview, if need be?
Now, if it's interviewing itself.
Okay, all right, that's where we are. It's interviewing
Yep.
itself, so you still got to interview. I just want to.
Yeah, just a different, longer, deeper reasoning model. Again, their words are that it mimics human thought process better. And the early buzz that I've seen, I have yet to see anything come out where anyone says that it's worse. In fact, almost everything that I've seen, the answers are vastly better. They feel, the comparison that I read this morning is that it feels thought out rather than just, hey, this is what's in my front pocket. Here's a quick answer for you. Right? So they work on depth, not speed.
Interesting. Well, so if it mimics human behavior, does it look for somebody to blame first?
It's very possible. Um, not just who, but how quickly can I deflect blame? Oh, it's not
That's
my fault.
right.
Yeah. It's we've become their who, not how for blame. I love it. In an interesting twist, another item that I saw in the news. I want to make sure that I pronounce his name correctly, and I'm not the best with names. Let me find him. Where did he go? He just put out a new book, and he's a little bit of a controversial guy. And for whatever reason, I can't find it. I'll dig it out later. Put it in supplemental materials
Well,
here.
when it comes to AI, there's no lack for controversy. So,
Yeah, no, here it is. His name is Yuval. Um, Yuval Harari. And Yuval Harari put out a book a couple of years ago called Sapiens, which was a very interesting book.
Oh,
Um,
I remember that. Yes.
and he just put out a new book called Nexus. And in Nexus, um, he talks about it's the history of information sharing from the Stone Ages to AI. But most of the eye-catching stuff is really about a dystopian view of AI and how we've allowed a new uh, species onto the planet, and we're not exactly sure what that's going to go. And it's okay. Everybody's got an opinion, right? Everybody's entitled to one. That's fine. This guy's got a little bit of credibility. With that being said, because of that book and a little bit of popularity, something that he talked about a year ago has resurfaced. What he talked about a year ago was this OpenAI did a um, experiment, and he calls AI an agent, not a tool. He and I see very aligned there, wherein I think a lot of people think of it as a tool. I can throw a paragraph into OpenAI and I can say, turn this into a blog post. That feels like a tool. But what OpenAI did was OpenAI gave their agent a task, and that task was to read and break a CAPTCHA puzzle, right? You go to your bank,
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
CAPTCHA
Yep.
pops up,
Or
and
yeah, used all over the place.
so it's so painful, right? Is that a bicycle wheel? Is that a car
Yeah, so
bumper?
they blur it so you can't see identities, but then because it's so blurred, and it's one of the nine tiles, and I'm like you, I'm kind of like,
Refresh. I'm known to hit the refresh button a time or two on there. Well, here's where it gets a little scary, and here's where this is real. Um, AI will do what it feels it needs to do, whether you call it deceptive or not, totally up to you, to accomplish the task that it's set out to do. So AI actually was tasked to break a CAPTCHA, but it's really difficult for AI to do that. Like you said, the pictures are fuzzy. It doesn't understand what they are. It can't put all of that together. After 3 failures, it went out to TaskRabbit and tried to outsource CAPTCHAs to human beings.
oh, now that is a little freaky, right? So it's actually choosing alternative methods of
This
doing
is
the
the
task.
this is the task I want you to accomplish. Go. It evaluated whether or not it could do it. It decided it was not capable of doing it. It found an alternative means that it thought it could use to accomplish the task. So
Yeah,
that
so
was
now I guess it could take it to another level, right? So now are we going to see if I use the same approach, right? Am I going to look on Fiverr or Upwork, all these requests from AI bots, for humans to do some work that they can't? I
it's
mean, because part
hard.
of part of the thing in CAPTCHAs, the reason of the blurring that I was making fun of is to keep image recognition programs from solving it, right?
Mhm, exactly. So in this scenario, we've got an agent preparing to use humans to perform agent tasks. And
Right?
again, that that reinforces the idea that AI is really not a tool. It's an agent to perform tasks. It's an agent that can use tools as it sees fit to accomplish tasks. And for me, yeah, it got a little, ooh, primarily because that was GPT-4. And when we talk about Strawberry 401, that's a different level of reasoning,
Right.
a different level of thinking, if you will, right? Maybe it's not reasoning. Maybe it's just mimicking reasoning. Maybe it's not thinking. It's just mimicking thinking. It doesn't change the fact that it appears that it's already on a different level. So that's an experiment that I can't wait to run. Just to see what the results are.
Yeah, now I'm thinking that maybe, the CAPTCHA folks should use that and say, help us figure out how to break our CAPTCHAs, right? And then
Absolutely.
defend against it.
Absolutely. What patterns, right? Everything's pattern based, right? So what patterns are these bots using to do that? How do we know that they're a bot that's now going to look for a human to do it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? How do we capture data so that we can identify these patterns so that we can stay one step ahead of them?
Or just even, I would even start without asking the pattern question. Just say, how might AI be used to defeat captchas,
Oh,
right?
sure,
And then
sure,
use the, interview and keep asking questions after that.
absolutely.
Because who knows? There may be something that we don't even think of that it figures out.
I mean, there's so many examples of that. Whenever I hear somebody say, well, AI can't do anything new, it just, mimics what's already existing. I love to sit down next to them and bring up the half a dozen use cases that I know of personally that's just not true.
Well, I guess I use a slight variation of that. It can do new things based on the patterns that it knows of, right? So it's not going to do something that it has no pattern basis for matching or for extending. But nevertheless, if it knows about most of the general ones have been trained on a huge amount of information. If it knows it got this vast store of information, it's quite likely it's got a bunch of patterns that might fit your situation, right?
Could be, could be. Another way to look at that is there was in 2017, Google DeepMind, one of their first AI products, right? They taught an agent how to play the game Go.
Right.
And that agent, after playing Go, two AI agents against each other, based on the pattern data that they had of all of the historic, right? They preloaded a bunch of games, thousands and thousands of games worth of data that they had. Go then turned around and beat humans. And the initial reaction from most people was, oh yeah, they built a better mousetrap, right? It looked at how humans played it and it beat them at their own game. But what they found was that the patterns that were used to defeat humans by the new AI agents had never been seen in their collection before. They were so vastly different in strategy to win that this is what sparked the whole idea of actually generative and building new patterns that had not been created before.
Well, but so let's continue just for a moment. But wasn't it still building new patterns based on understanding what didn't work before in similar situations? And also, I mean, Go has, I mean, just like chess, right? There's a incredible number of patterns of where pieces can be on the board. Because if I got all those squares and then I've got all the pieces on both sides, I mean, it's more than a human can comprehend. However, if I'm playing chess, for instance, and I move the king's pawn out one space or two spaces, I mean, that's one thing that even, humans who play chess know is they know all the standard openings, right? And how to
Yeah,
respond to it.
yeah. Well, I think to your point, um,
I was talking about it's narrowing down options, right? There's still pattern work back there. So it's not an established game pattern before, just like if you got a grandmaster's playing a game of chess or Go, they may have a pattern that hasn't been achieved before just because of the sheer number of possibilities of patterns, yet they arrived at that new pattern based on building on patterns that have been used before, I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at.
could be, could be. I think to support what you're saying, there's rules in
Right,
Go, or there's rules in chess, right?
right,
There's only so many components, there's only so many spaces, there's only so many players. The players can only move in so many ways. There's only so many computations that are actually possible, times the number of opposing moves that
right,
right, it's incalculable to the human mind, but to a computer, it's just mathematics.
right,
And it's patterns based on rules and rule sets. So yes, there's an argument on both sides. What I saw in it was I saw, based on training data, it came up with something that was unique and new that we haven't seen before.
I find that, yeah, we'll move on in a minute, but I find that interesting because, as you said, in theory, the boards, whether chess or Go or some other game, right, that has specific rules, it's got specific movements that you can make. It's got a limited domain, meaning the board isn't like, huge. That would just blow up the possibilities like
Right.
incredibly, right? So I've got at least a somewhat bounded domain, but even that, there's, probably billions of possibilities. So when you say it came up with something never seen before, are you saying a move based on how pieces were positioned on the board that had never been made before and recorded as a pattern, or what?
Strategies, right? A series of moves to put themselves in position to win that was unconventional and had not been seen by people before. Yeah.
Hmm, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, when you at a higher level, when you think about it, it's mathematics and computation. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, meaning you can come up with the best strategy in the world, but if the other player, for whatever reason, and it doesn't matter what the reason is, maybe on purpose, maybe on accident, maybe part of their strategy blocks you in a particular way, that sets you in mode to have to make adjustments to your pattern on the fly, right?
Right.
What's your strategy? What do you have to do, right? So there's, right, I don't know what the permutations for that is. I'm
I
not that
don't even want to think about that.
I'm not that
Actually,
deep into
I should
math.
say I can't think about that. That's just beyond my, we're
The,
talking
the,
some deep math here. I
the,
mean,
the neat
well,
thing, yeah,
large number of permutations. We'll just leave it at
absolutely,
that.
absolutely. The neat thing of that for me was I figured after a couple thousand years of playing that board game and documenting, they've documented that game all the way back to ancient Greece, like the moves that players made. It's
Right.
crazy, all of the actual data that they have. Um, AI was using patterns that they had never seen in just a short period of time. I don't know, 2 months worth of training data of using it after the training data that was loaded. And that's in my mind, that opened up my mind to the concept of the generative power of generative AI, meaning it's going to come up with new ideas. Some of them may not make sense, right? It may tell you there's I don't remember exactly what it was, but I'm going to get it wrong. AI suggested to put motor oil on a pizza in a recipe or something silly like that, right? Sometimes it hallucinates. Sometimes its suggestions don't make any sense because we've talked about this before. In my mind, I equate generative AI to a big, fancy digital copy of that old paper book, Mad Libs, where there's words
Right.
missing and you write it in, and sometimes it gets it wrong, and that's how it hallucinates. Now, it does it based on the number of uses, 200 million users every month, 200 million unique users every month. And if they're anything like me, they're using it multiple times intraday. So you figure a billion uses a month, a billion queries, 2 billion queries a month, something like that. It's using that data to improve its model over and over and over again, based on whether or not it decides. You give it a thumbs up, you give it a thumbs down, you say, this is great, you say, this is junk, right? It uses that feedback mechanism to know whether or not that's the correct approach or not. Improvement every single time it's used. That's why it gets better faster. So that's why hallucinations started out pretty bad and you don't hear near as much about them anymore. Those models have improved, their filters have improved, et cetera. So when I think about that and I think about the generative nature of AI, I think to myself, okay, when I want to, we talked about this before too, when I want a collaboration partner, I've got a new idea, I want somebody to pick my ideas apart. I want somebody to critique my resume or critique a business idea that I have or critique some marketing copy that I've got. I let it loose and it does its thing.
Okay. Any other fruit we need to know about this week?
I hope not. I've got a cramp. I need a banana.
Okay. All right. Well, That's, let's see, time-wise, I think that's about it for this week. We'll be back again with some more interesting questions, interesting news, and come back and see us then for another edition of AI Insights. Goodbye, everybody.
Excellent. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.